Morena and welcome everybody to this morning's Community and Recreation meeting on the 5th of August 2021. We're just going to stand and start with our karakia. So welcome everyone. I see that we've got some faces in the public area, so welcome to you and welcome to our two youth councillors, and also we have members of the public joining us in the public part of our meeting this morning, which will be fantastic with what they got to share for us. So please give them your full attention and have some really spot-on relevant questions for them at the end. That'd be fantastic. So as you can see, we've got the dynamic duo chairing today's meeting. See Von Bowater and myself, so there will be a little adjournment and we'll be swapping over the chairing roles later in the meeting. So if we can focus on what's in front of us and keep our questions relevant and concise, it would be much appreciated. So at this point in time, I'm going to, oh yes, and also please remember that we are live streaming, so do take note of that, and welcome to the media sitting in the room as well. Hi Tim. And so can I please have any apologies? Judy?
Yeah, I have to step out at 9:30 for about 15 minutes or so.
Okay, thank you. And we have Rachel Sampson for lateness. Is there anybody else? No? Great, awesome. So do we have a mover and a shaker of the apologies? So Gail and Matt, thank you. Sorry, I can see my Rotary chairperson skills are creeping in. I wanted a mover, not a shaker. So, so mover and seconder. So that's awesome. Thank you. Sorry for that. We now have. Can we please put the motion? All those in favour? Aye. And those against? All right, carried. Thank you. And right. So let me see where we're up to. Have we got any interest on any items on the agenda today? Pete Rainey?
Thanks, Trudy. I'm a member of the Nelson City Brass Band Committee. In regards to the item about the winding up of the Nelson Brass Trust, I'm happy not to enter into debate or vote on the matter, but I'm happy also to stay here because I may be able to answer questions in relation to the band if that's going to be of any use. But yeah.
Thank you. Damia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I have to declare an interest in relation to item 9. I'm a trustee of the Nelson Municipal Band Trust, so I won't be voting on that matter.
Thank you. Is there anybody else with any potential, or if there is, as you get into the items, please raise it then and we can address it at the time. Thank you. So do we have, let's see. So we do have a public forum today. So I'm going to invite Carolyn and Gordon up from Age Concern and Volunteer Nelson with their awesome initiative that is community led, and so please take note of how you can assist them with this. We've got a PowerPoint and I'll welcome you both to the meeting, and we have 10 minutes. So if you do have questions, I would ask that you please keep them concise and to the point so that we can keep them in the time frame that they're here, because they have stepped out of their busy days in the community doing some awesome work. So I'm going to hand it over to Gordon and Carolyn. Just put your mic on when you speak. You'll hear a bell at 8 minutes. That'll be a 1 ding, and then 2 at the 10 minutes. So thank you. I'll hand it over.
Kia ora koutou, ko Gordon Oldfield, toko ingoa. After I experienced sight loss, I was referred to what was then known as the Royal New Zealand Foundation for the Blind, and I was referred there to undergo rehabilitation. Now, part of this rehabilitation was something called daily orientation and mobility. And as far as this training was concerned, it taught me how to live my life, my everyday sort of things that you do, like making sure that you can pair your socks together, that you don't wear one orange and one black sock, sorting out how to make a cup of tea and things like that. And of course, an important part of that training was mobility. And for me, often just getting from the letterbox back to the front door could be quite an adventure, normally into the garden or something like that. But I had to be shown how to use the long cane, and my mobility instructor, Roy, he would started like very close by to my house, and then it spread a little further, and then we would go to places like Queen's Gardens and try and navigate around there, and all aspects of mobility without sight was covered in that training. But I distinctly remember one particular day when we were down at Main Beach and we were sitting on the bench, and Roy said to me, we can train you to cross roads and get around without having an accident, but probably your biggest risk is going to be social isolation. And I thought that's a very strange thing for somebody to say. In my previous life, I'd been a pharmacist in a busy community pharmacy, and I think if somebody had said social isolation, I was like, that sounds pretty good. Thanks for that. And and I had young children that were at primary school, and my mind was on earning an income and maintaining keeping my family and being a father and a husband, etc. So this seemed like a really weird thing. And but as I found, as time progressed, I found that social isolation can become very real very quickly. And it didn't take long for me to find that I was spending a lot of my time at home, not going, when there were opportunities to go out, I often felt, the challenge was just too much, was just became too difficult, and also on a very limited income, too expensive. And so I tended to just stay at home for a long time and spend a lot of time becoming quite inwardly focused, ruminating. And as you know, those are features of depression. And unfortunately, another feature of depression is social withdrawal. So these two things compound together, and you find yourself sliding very quickly down a slippery slope to serious mental illness after that. And being part of the disability community in Nelson, I must say I've met a lot of other disabled people that have had very similar experiences, and some still struggling with social isolation and loneliness. When I joined Volunteer Nelson, I knew that one of the benefits of volunteering to community and community organizations is well known. There's about 1 million people that volunteer, and the economic value of that is about $4 billion to New Zealand. But also the volunteers get a tremendous amount of benefit from volunteering. And most of that comes from being part of an organization, having that social connection with others. And one of the first HUIs that I attended, a national HUI for volunteer centres, there was somebody that gave a presentation on a project called Napier Connects. And it was all about a collaboration of some organizations in Napier that worked mostly around age concern in Napier. And it was to address social isolation amongst older people. So when I returned back to Nelson, I got in touch with Age Concern Nelson Tasman. And there I met a kindred spirit in the form of Caroline, who had a very great appreciation for what the damage that social isolation could do, mostly amongst older people. So eventually we managed to get to run out a program called Nelson Connects, and that is a program that is being funded by Nelson City Council. And we appreciate the funding that you've provided for that. So that focused on the older age cohort. At Volunteer Nelson, we also had targeted programs to encourage volunteering to those that we felt would benefit the most. So we have a youth volunteering program. We have a program directed towards those living with a disability and for migrants, mostly former refugees. But overall, I must say that there has been a need for a program, a whole population program that can address social isolation in a very structured way, that will have addressing social isolation not as a byproduct of a program, but as a focus of the program. And I would like to now just hand over to Caroline to tell you the Wellbe story.
Thanks, Gordon. Morena, everybody. So Wellbe originated in the PHO a couple of years ago, and then following COVID last year, they decided they had to focus on other things, which is fair enough. So we, as a steering group who'd been put together to help the PHO with that project, decided that actually tackling social connection was just as important and probably more important than ever. So myself and Gordon applied for and were successful in getting Lottery's COVID response funding. That's a one-off funding fund for 40 million that opened last year. So this is the steering group members here. So you can see there's we think most of the key people around the table that need to be there, certainly. We're really pleased with what we've got. And these are the main elements of Wellbe. I'm aware that time's running quickly. So 3 prongs to Wellbe, inspired by a project in southwest of England called Health Connections Mendip, which has been staggeringly successful. It is funded by the NHS England and it's hosted within GP practices. But what it's done is reverse hospital admissions. So that part of England is the only part of England that had hospital admissions reduced. All other parts were increasing. They reckon that for every £1 they spend on Health Connections Mendip, they're saving the system 6 by keeping people socially connected and improving their well-being. So there's 3 elements of Wellbe: talking cafes. Anybody's welcome to come along, have a cuppa, find out what's going on in your community. They'll be hosted there by age concerned staff or volunteer Nelson staff to start off with. We hope that as this grows, other people can be trained to be talking cafe hosts. Those are up and running now. We've got the Found Directory. I'm sure you all know about the Found Directory. So that has been given a significant boost in the last year. So it's now much more usable, much more user-friendly. And that's our go-to, if you like, for all the clubs and organisations and things that are going on. And then lastly, signposters. So we would certainly hope that all Nelson City councillors and staff will become community signposters. It means an hour's training and then you are good to go. Basically, it's not formal volunteering. You're not signing up to do anything specific. You are just aware of what's going on in the community. You can direct people to talking cafes. You can direct them to the Found Directory, and it's just avoiding that. I wish I'd known about, but I can help you with something. I know there's something out there for you. So talking cafes, let's say we've started these already. We've got them going in the Nook, which is the new cafe at the Habitat Hub, and we're running them in McCashins on Main Road, Stoke. We had one on Tuesday. We had 3 people there, not a huge amount of people, but the connections that they made was fantastic. We had a retired couple in their 70s who live in a boat in the marina. They just like to get out every day and meet new people and see what's going on. And then a young woman who's got stuck here, if you like, from COVID last year at Nimit, and just keen to meet other people. So we had a lovely intergenerational connection. So it's just giving people an opportunity to come in, sit down, have a chat, meet somebody new, find out what's going on in the community. And so there's our website, wellbe.org.nz. Please jump on, have a look, find out the talking cafes, direct people towards it, sign up for community signposter training. We are, this is baby steps. We've got $75,000 for a year, not a huge amount of money. That runs out in February. So we're looking for more funding the whole time, but we can only do so much. I think that is, we've got lots and lots of ideas and initiatives. There's lots of ways this could stretch out. We're hoping to integrate with primary health. We've got health improvement practitioners, health coaches now being placed in GP practices. Their job is to, help support people to get into other things other than just going to see the GP for things that the GPs can't fix. So this has got huge potential and, to make Nelson Tasman one of the best connected communities in the country. So we're really quite excited about it. Within 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Well, awesome. So that was through that. That was pretty good. So I'll open it up for questions and let's not get into our own personal talking cafe at this time. So Matt.
Thanks, Judy. Thanks, Gordon and Caroline. Congratulations. Quick question. How much do you think that slide into social isolation is cultural? Like, we live in an individualistic Western society, and do you think that contributes sometimes?
It could do. An analogy is that we travel through life in a convoy of other people. And at times you can have significant events where you find that convoy quite seriously depleted. I think that all cultures value social connection, and I'd say in telling my story, what I wanted to illustrate is that social isolation can happen to people that you would least expect it to happen, and you can be quite shocked to find yourself isolated. So also, when you talk about cultural factors, we have quite a lot of people that have moved from other countries to New Zealand and live in Nelson. I think about 27% of the population were born in New Zealand. And for many of them, they've left those cultural connections behind and often struggle to make the same sort of connections back here.
And quickly through the chair, do you think we can learn things from other cultures which would help?
I think that we must always be open-minded to learn anything from any other cultures. And if we see that a culture is doing something really well, and we're not doing it so well, let's take it on and incorporate it into our culture.
One of the things we talk about in the signposter training is blue zones. So I don't know if you've heard of the blue zones, but they're 5 parts of the world. There's one in Japan, one in Costa Rica, one in America, Sardinia in Italy, and I can't remember the last one. But these are places where people live really long and well. And there's lots and lots of studies and research being done into them. And it is about social connection. In Sardinia in Italy, for example, it's the only place in the world where men live as long as women, which is a phenomenon. But they've gone and studied it, and it's about they are part of society. They're not warehoused or shoved away because they're valued. And I'm talking only about older people here, but I think there are cultural differences. I think we live in the age of nuclear family, so how can we challenge that? Yeah.
I think if we're thinking of age cohorts and social isolation and loneliness, the highest incidence of reports of self-reporting of feeling isolated and lonely actually is those between the age of 15 and 24, which is quite surprising, actually.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for that. No other questions? Darcy?
Kia ora, through the chair, does Wabi reach or try to reach many youth?
We need to, and that is our plan. We're probably going to be working with Nelson Tasman Youth Workers Collective, so working with the youth workers to reach the youth. But we definitely need to be reaching a lot more youth, and it'd be great if the Youth Council came on board and first step to undergo signposter training. Just take an hour out of your day.
Awesome, thank you. And there's also Whanaki Youth is on the steering committee, so just be aware that there is some youth input at the steering committee level as well. But thank you very much for taking time out of your busy days. I know how busy you are out there for coming in, so thank you for that. And as they recommend, everyone please jump on their website, look at when the next talking cafes are, and also sign up to be a signposter. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to the next part of our agenda, and that's confirmation of the minutes from the meeting the 17th of June 2021.
I'll move those.
Thank you, Mel. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Brian. Is there any comment and anything else? Other words, I'll put it. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, we'll take that as moved. Thank you. Okay, now in front of you, you'll find, sorry, I didn't get it to the GAs in time, is part of the written co-chair's report. And you can see that there's some awesome things happening in our community, or happened. And one of them is the Taurama Roa festival that happened, and it was such an amazing thing. I think it blew up social media with everyone's photos, videos, postings and everything else. What an awesome event that we hold in Nelson, and it certainly did take off on that. So well done to everybody who was involved, and the creativity and the inspiration they can do with simple things just blows your mind. We've also got the 4 lanes in the youth lane coming up, so have a watch out for that and let the experience continue on in our inner city. There's something I do want to just really touch on, which is the accessible carousel at Tohono. As we saw in my report, the Liberty Swing has been upgraded, which is much to the delight of many families out there who use that and are certainly enjoying and creating fond memories. So the carousel will soon be installed once we have a break in the weather, and there'll be something else for people to be able to access on there. And that's what we got. And we've got the library. It's got a new initiative underway with their Korero Are Hapuri. So go onto that website, check it out. There's lots of really good information in there that sort of ties in with what we just talked about and heard from the Wellbe program about connecting people to different ways and making sure that people find interest. There is many different things happening in there, and it looks like an awesome resource that the community can certainly find ways to connect to as well. And then the Nelly Knitters, they don't get a lot of airtime, but I'm going to talk about them because they do an amazing thing within our community, and that's they come have a chat. They got together, started knitting, created these blankets, little bonnets, little socks and stuff like that, and they donate them. The materials are donated, and then they come along once a week. Initially it was at the Nelly Library in Tohono on a Monday, and now they also meet at the Almatuma Library on a Thursday. Now, how those items benefit our community is they go out to a lot of the non-profit organisations with the families who are struggling, and they do make a huge difference. So really do, if you enjoy knitting and you've got some time and want to connect and have a chat with somebody else and know that those items are going to get well used, that is certainly something worth looking into and connecting with. The families that receive them really do appreciate them, especially in winter with the extra blankets and the slippers, socks that they knit. I know when I worked in a different hat, the families couldn't get enough of them, so they were certainly really well appreciated. So on that, from my side of the Chair's report, I just want to say a summary of a lot of good work and development is happening and is taking place and has happened within our community. And I'd just like to take this time to thank all the staff, volunteers and members of the public for their hard work and their support and the determination to ensure these projects, ideas and initiatives are successful, and as much as what our community need to help them feel connected. But on that, I'm going to hand it over to my dynamic partner here to add her verbal part of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Trudy. Yes, my report is verbal. Apologies for the fact of not getting it out sooner. What I've done is I've got a little bit of show and tell just to make sure that everyone's excited about being here. So that will be part of my presentation and report this morning. To begin with, a Citizenship Ceremony. I was fortunate enough last week to attend, and the Deputy Mayor, Judy Edgar, was in charge of the proceedings. It was a wonderful morning. It was quite moving. The excitement and sheer joy of the participants was humbling, actually. Shouldn't have worn mascara that day. And one of the highlights for me was the Kapahaka group from Hampden Street School. Very entertaining, and they actually performed an original song that their music teacher's father had written called Reach for the Stars. It was lovely. It was really amazing, and I felt really privileged to be there. And that gives me a bit of a segue. We've got a wonderful event this weekend at the Travel Centre. Anyone seen in here? I really feel like a school teacher. It's a celebration of Kapahaka in our region, described as an extravaganza of local talent. Entry is by Koha, and there will be more information on Nelson City Council's Facebook. So I urge anyone who is watching to look that up and do attend, and it sounds like it's going to be an amazing event for all involved. Youth Council. Trudy's already touched on what their involvement and some of the things that they are with. They have provided advice, support and input on a number of projects, including the Stoke Youth Park, the Youth 4 Lanes event, which they are running, I believe, Nelson City Council spatial plan, and they took an active role in a number of events, including widely successful Matariki celebrations at Founders Heritage Park. Theo? Darcy. I'd like to take this opportunity to also acknowledge the Youth Council's submission to the LTP, which was very insightful, thorough, well done to all contributed. Please pass that on. And whilst I'm on the subject of the youth, I've got a quick acknowledgement of Sophie Winnick-Smith, which has been brought to my attention. She previously was a youth councillor and has just won the New Zealand Impact Award. My understanding it was, amongst many of the other good work that she does in our community, for involvement with Giving Aroha, which is a wonderful group, provide an evening meal for the homeless once a week in Anzac Park. Sophie's comment, because I got onto Facebook and had a wee look, was she strives to make the world a better place through positive actions and volunteer work. So congratulations, Sophie. On the branching through onto Volunteer Expo, Councillor Noonan and I managed to go out to that. It was held at the Annesbrook Church and final day of Volunteer Week. Perfect opportunity for 30 community organisations to showcase the benefits of volunteering, network with others and promote their organisations. A wide range took part: environmental groups, hearing, vision, loss, small volunteer leads like the likes of St John's and bigger Nelson Tasman Hospice. However, all had one thing in common, and that was a need to recruit local volunteers to help them deliver key services and contribute to the wellbeing of the region. And anecdotal evidence from the day was that it was a resounding success. People enjoyed the opportunity to network with other groups, organisations, find out what else is going on in the community and to learn from what others were doing. Event was a particular benefit to the small volunteer-led organisations that don't have paid staff to recruit volunteers, and this is their opportunity. In fact, many of the stands were manned by volunteers themselves, and she's just popped out of the room, but I'd just like to acknowledge our Deputy Mayor Judine. She was there for hospice, so ka pai. And next and last and finally is Global Soap. Again, visual aid people, here we go. This is a little pack that is given to homeless, and a contribution there from Global Soap in there as well. And I think to me, it's amazing what they have done and how they've been involved. And they recently organised and held an event at Global Soap celebrating compassion, and Nelson nurtures its needy. Jodie and the team held it in recognition of the fantastic work various organisations in the community do to support vulnerable people. Attendees included Nelson Tasman Methodist Parish, Nelson Community Night Shelter, Housing First Program, Mail Room, Methodist Mission South Island, Nelson Women's Centre, Loaves and Fishes, Giving Aroha in Anzac Park, Victory Community Centre, New Zealand Red Cross, and of course Global Soap. They wanted to express strong gratitude from the group was given for assistance received from Nelson City Council, Rotary and Mitre 10. I popped in and snapped this off Jodie and asked for a few words, and she explained a couple of years ago it began with Brian Hendrick from the Nelson Tasman Methodist Parish, and he's made several trips to and top up for the soap, for the packs, and discussions have with Brian over the past, the group's making use of them, primarily the homeless. Jodie admitted she didn't know an awful lot, and Brian really opened her eyes, and so she wanted to have a celebration of the people that were all involved, those community and organisations that have been involved with. And apart from organising the event, the other great reason I think Jodie and her team deserve recognition was her parting comment to me. She hoped that increased awareness would perhaps inspire other individuals and businesses to help, and that we do need to look out for one another after all. So well done. And when this pack was spotted this morning by someone, it was brought to my attention that they make, the authority of Miss Bling, they make the best pet shampoo that there is. So I was just thinking of Bernie, who was in there earlier. So if I can do a wee plug, apparently the pet shampoo is amazing. So, would you like to, or shall I? Can someone?
No, got it.
You got it?
Yep, sweet.
Great.
Sweet. So if I can have someone please receive my chair report and a seconder. Thanks, Pete, and thanks, Tim. Right, in that case, I'll put it, and all those in favour?
Yes.
Would you like
yes.
to comment?
So,
Okay, if you can keep it concise now, that'd be great.
Oh, okay. I've noticed you made that point several times this morning. I don't know. Madam Chair, 5.1, it relates to the swing, the Liberty swing. 5.1 there. The last two lines, the keys are available for permanent hire. So is that something new in respect to the keys? Because there has been some criticism of the fact that you had to go to council to get the keys to use the Liberty Swing and then return them and that type of thing. I sort of read that as quite a significant improvement in what was happening before. So could you just sort of tell us more about that, please?
Yes, my understanding is that the feedback was received from the community, and Nelson City Council's fabulous staff responded and have made it more accessible so that people can have the keys and use that equipment at their leisure.
So they hire a key, they pay it some money, do they?
Oh,
How does it work?
Is that
I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I would think that that it wouldn't be at a cost to a member of the community because playgrounds are a public good provided facility.
And they retain the key, do they, those people?
yes?
Permanent hire, yes.
Good, that's great. I think that's a vast improvement and will be well received.
It is indeed. It's very awesome. Okay, Matt.
Thanks, Judy. Just 4 lanes is going to be upon us pretty soon. I haven't seen a huge amount of publicity going out into the community about it. So I was wondering, could anyone share any other details about what it's going to involve in addition to what's in the report? Like, I'm guessing we're not going to have a hot air balloon this year, which is a shame, but what else is happening?
Okay, thank you for that, Matt. Myself, I've seen it all over social media. I've seen it printed on hard copies of media stuff gone out, but I'm not aware of any balloon this year, unless staff can help me out with that. No, I'm getting nods of shakes.
We don't need a hot air balloon. I was just wondering, is it just going to be the same as 2 years ago? Is anything going to be different about it?
Mr. Preston Thomas might be able to comment.
Thank you, through the chair. There is a specific youth lane that's happening this year, which will be amazing. We've taken the feedback from the success of previously and basically building on it, but I don't think there is a balloon this year, I'm sorry.
Thank you for that.
And through the chair, and where is the youth lane? Where's that going?
Darcy, would you like to answer that?
Yep, they'll be through in Church Street.
Great. Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
Okay, that's awesome that we're having a family conference in the chamber. Fantastic. Tim.
Good to see we can connect at the table there. Tuesday 4 Lanes has been promoted extremely well, and I think it'll be a very exciting event with the youth focus. And I'd just like to say well done, Trudy and Yvonne, on your chair's report. And I think you've broken new ground being a colour report and bringing some visuals. Thank you. Enjoy.
That's really nice.
No problems there, Tim. We can happy to accommodate. So we've had it moved, we had it second. I'll put it, all those in favour, all those against, take it as moved. So thank you for that. We're now going to move on to our youth councillors. So have an update and a brief from them. Who would like to go first? Darcy?
So on the 3rd of July, Youth Council attended Te Hui Hui o Matariki, which was a huge success, as I'm sure many of you know. We helped with welcoming people at the door, sorting waste and recycling, and emceeing the stages. There are about 6 youth councillors there, and we all really enjoyed it and think it's a great example of the kind of events we'd like to see council put on and that we love getting involved with. The food was great and the fireworks were an awesome end to the night, and it was really impressive to see how big a crowd it could draw in the middle of winter. On the 16th of July, 6 youth councillors drove down to Blenheim to meet some of the other youth councils, including Kaikoura, Murchison, Waimea and Marlborough. We spent the day doing team building exercises, getting to know the other youth councillors, and we had a workshop on the COVID-19 vaccine, which had a lot of good information. The interesting part for me was how different the youth councils around the top of the south are. For example, Murchison's is all under 13 and mainly organises events for other youth, while Waimea's main job is delegating $100,000 of funding to other organisations. I think everyone was very keen to be there, but a few councillors were disappointed that it felt like we were doing team building exercises for a team that didn't really exist. So it'd be cool to see us catch up over Zoom again. And yet 4 youth councillors have been attending the Active Travel and Speed Management Project Reference Group, along with other community interest groups. And yeah, we've been really impressed with how dedicated council staff has been at getting our voices heard in the room with a lot of strong opinions. And finally, from me, we've been working on organising the youth lane of the Four Lanes Festival, which is going really well. It's coming up on the 24th of August, and at the moment we're looking at having a jam-packed event with live music, comedy, skate competitions, games and interactive artwork. And I'm really happy with the level of leadership Youth Council's been given for this project and the ability to bring our own ideas to the table. Over to Thea.
Excellent. Thanks for having us today. So I'll just continue on with the youth lane. So it's really cool from both Youth Council and a youth perspective to see Council put the initiative forward to have a youth lane. And I just want to say thank you to the Council staff that made it happen, that we could have a youth lane this year and to give it the opportunity to be completely youth-led as well, obviously with support from adults. But yeah, it's great to see that initiative being taken, and we'd love to see it more often and more youth events crop up. And I know Axel and the events team are working on that. So we're also at the moment working with the library, just talking about how the library can be improved, what we want to see. I believe youth councillors had to write some love or breakup letters to the library at the last meeting, and that was interesting. Some of the stuff that we talked about was actually quite important, and we were talking about stuff that we love about the library, why we would want to break up with the library and all of that. Also, over the weekend just gone, 3 youth councillors attended the Festival for the Future, which was an incredible opportunity. We had great opportunities to network with youth councils from around the country and see how they all operate, and possibly start getting some ideas for a nationwide initiative with a whole lot of youth councils, which will be incredible if we can pull it off, but it will be a lot of work. Yeah, so I'll go on to what we've got coming up. So we've got a couple of youth councils attending the Arts Festival launch tonight, which will be a great experience just to talk to people and basically get up for the Arts Festival in October. Obviously, we've got the Youth Lane for the Four Lanes Festival. Check it out if you can, or send your kids along to it, because it will be a great event. I can guarantee it will be a good event, but also I think the whole Four Lanes Festival will be a lot better than the one 2 years ago. So I'm excited for that. Then we've got Laugh Nelson coming up again. Go along to that. It's always a lot of fun. And we are also slowly getting into the process of starting induction planning and our recruitment planning. So our recruitment for Nelson Youth Council opens in September, closes in October, I think. I will have to confirm those dates. And yeah, then induction will be at the end of the year. Cheers.
Awesome. Imagine that. Crikey. Learning to write Dear John letters. Fantastic for a library. Never thought of that before. That's quite interesting. A lot of fantastic work in there, guys. Does anyone have any questions for our youth councillors? So hopefully there will be a lot of faces at the art festival launch tonight at 5:30 at the Theatre Royal. That'd be great to see a lot of people there supporting that. Awesome work. Great for the update. So now we will move on, and I'm going to move to the Bishop Cedar Trust, item 8 in the agenda. I'm going to invite Tanya, Officer Tanya, and Julie Catapult and Gabrielle Harvey to the table. And we'll go through this. We just have a moment. So welcome, and I'll hand it over to our Officer Tanya to present and go from there. Thank you.
Kia ora all. As I believe some time ago was April that you saw the draft statement of intent, and that was sent for a few fairly minor reviews that have been undertaken, and you'll see that they're mainly around education and just clarifying some detail there around the learning experiences outside the classroom. I'm not sure if you know what they are. They're Ministry of Education funded programs that the Ministry has been under a review for a little while. The good news is that since this report was written, some funding has been reconfirmed, but it looks like the Ministry is going to a model of broader based services and very locally focused services. So that's really good news. There was some detail to be added around really clarifying that alignment to both this council and Tasman District Council's community outcomes. So that's been done in a table, which makes that nice and clear. And then it was just sharpening up those really smart measures. So the specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely ways of reporting. So that was around visitor reporting, the sustainability of performance, health and safety, visitor and community programs, Toi Māori programs and the Friends. Sustainability performance was something that was highlighted by this committee, and there are several outcomes that have been identified, and I think we probably found that a lot of that work was happening, and it was getting that down really well on paper.
So, Julie or Gabrielle, is there anything you'd like to add or mention before I let the councillors free? Okay. Judy.
Thank you. I first just want to thank you for all the smart measures that you've put in here. It's really great. I just want to check, Tanya said that generally they reflected work you were already doing. I guess I just want to make sure that there's a balance between stretch and deliverability. And I guess I'm saying that because I don't want you to feel that you had to overstretch. It was more about having the measures rather than necessarily pushing yourselves beyond your capacity or resourcing.
Through the chair, that could be some of my wording, that they were things that were already being undertaken and worked towards, and just clarifying that on paper, I think. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure you weren't overstretching yourselves, because I do realise, yeah, limited capacity and resourcing. So, yeah, thank you very much for that. Just with the LEOTC risk, do you have any idea about, I mean, look, you know, I had a child who attended the after school, and, you know, and children who have gone to the programs, and they're of such immense value. Do you have any idea what direction the government's going in, or, yeah, what might be happening in that space?
We still haven't got clear guidelines about what the new learning experiences outside the classroom, even if it's going to be called that, regime will be. We're anticipating that there will be an opportunity arising to apply before the end of this year. Our contract, and similarly at the museum, our contracts will expire at the end of December. So we've had very little guideline coming from the Ministry of Education, except to say that something is going to be put in place.
Right.
And it'll still be, I imagine we'll need to tender for it, and it will be contestable.
Okay, I'll just say I certainly hope if anyone from the ministry is listening, they continue to value arts and cultural experiences, and I'm sure if you need any support from council, we will absolutely be there for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Mel?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through to Tanya. Thank you for your report, Tanya. In June, there was a quarterly report, and it made reference to the fact that we weren't getting user satisfaction and visitor numbers from the Bishop Cedar Trust in their reporting. And I'm just wanting you to point me to where we've covered that off in this list of additional smart measures that you're adding here. Can you just point me to where, for example, visitor numbers and user satisfaction are requested, please?
Through the chair, to clarify, I didn't see that come through as part of the resolution and the request back through the SOI. So I'm wondering, is that something that came through in the resident survey? So I think satisfaction might be measured in there.
Well, to help you, in June, on the quarterly report, performance report, it said that it mentioned about measures that have been met and on track. 5 are noted as not on track, and 2 of them related to the Bishop Suitor Trust, and 1 was user satisfaction and some sort of reference to that, and visitor numbers at the Bishop Suitor Art Gallery. So I thought they would now be included in this list of smart measures. In fact, I would recommend they do be included, yeah.
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but one of our first targets and measures is the number of visitors we receive a year, and we have a new measure in there. 85% of the surveyed visitors recommend visiting the suitor to others. So that's a new target measure that's been inserted into this statement of intent.
Well, I can take that up with our officers here at another time, perhaps. But I'm just referring to the June agenda. The 9th of, is it the June? Yes, it is. 17th of June, Thursday the 17th of June, and the quarterly report. It said that user satisfaction and visitor numbers at the Bishop Suitor Gallery are not being reported on at this point. And my point at this meeting is to just draw that to your attention and say, tell me where we're now including them in the smart measures you've got here, so that they can be reported on.
Through the chair, we have a quarterly report coming up, so we'll check if that's going to be included in that. It might be 2 different reporting channels that we're using, but Andrew might have more on that.
Okay. So when I look at the KPIs for the suitor in the report today, so we could have explicit KPIs which say we've had this number of people through the suitor, or we could take the approach that's been taken in the SOI, which looks at the different activity areas and has measures around numbers of groups and hires engaged in different activities. So I think what the suitor is doing in this SOI, rather than doing that mechanical process of number of people coming through per se, it's actually taking the approach, a more qualitative approach, in terms of the different activities it's engaged in. And similarly, I think with the approach, you could say to the community, what's your level of satisfaction with the suitor? Or you could take the approach of saying, would you recommend the suitor as a venue or a place to visit, which is what Ms. Catchpole is saying, I think, in terms of that 3.1.1 under governance. So I think my feeling is that those questions, while not directly influenced by the quarterly report, I don't think, are actually accommodated in here, but I'm happy to have more discussion about that in future. I wouldn't recommend relitigating the SOI on that basis, but I do think a lot of that information is accommodated in here as it is.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, so we'll move on to Rachel Sanson.
Thank you, through the chair. Kia ora. Thanks so much for coming in today. I just had one question in regards to, it's page 26 of the SOI, or page 50 of our agenda. The third to bottom point regarding potential living wage adjustments. And I was just wondering whether you're able to give a little more information about what that means, potential living wage adjustments. Does that mean that everybody's already on the living wage, or there's a time frame for transitioning to the living wage?
Not all our staff are currently on the living wage, and we were waiting until 1 July, and when we knew what our operational funding would be before making further decisions on that.
Are you able to give us an update on
And
that?
we're hoping and intending to move to paying the living wage.
And is there a time frame around that?
That will be going to our next board meeting.
Okay, thanks. I'm just following it up because in the SO E 1.18.3, one of the things that was, I guess, that we, one of the expectations, I guess, we communicated was the hope that, you know, we're trying to have all organisations funded by council transitioning to the living wage.
Okay, thank you
Thanks
for
so
that.
much. Maybe we could get an update from staff if that happens.
Thank you for that, Councillor. As we've heard, they're reviewing that at their next meeting, and that's something that is mindful and in front of them. So thank you, appreciate that. So I'll move on to Matt.
Thanks, Judy. Nice to see you. Thanks for coming. Just picking up on Rachel's question, if the board did decide to move forward with the living wage, when would you expect it to be in place?
When that decision's made, it'll be backdated to the beginning of July.
Okay, thank you. On page 43 of our report, there's a paragraph talking about the use of the theatre and the foyer, and talks about a drop in venue hire. As you may be aware, recently there was a discussion on social media about the Suter, in which a number of members of Nelson's performing arts community took part. It was a brief discussion that burnt with the intensity of 1,000 suns. So I wanted to ask you about that. Do you have any thoughts about the costs of hiring the Suter for performing arts groups? For the theatre, yeah.
Facebook's as good as caffeine for keeping you awake at night. But just in reference to our theatre, the current pricing regime's actually been in place for the last 3 years without increase, and it is differentially, there's differential pricing for commercial, community and educational use. So we're just about to look and review our pricing, but at the time when we did set those prices, it was benchmarked against other venues in Nelson, and we had input from council staff at the time when we did set those rates. Obviously, we do want to have a well-patronised, well-used community facility, but I should also say it is one of our opportunities for revenue generation for the Suter.
Okay, thanks. Just through the chair, so if we haven't really discussed it as council, but if the council decided that we'd like to see the theatre being used more for community type productions, how would we change things?
I'm going to answer with a little caution here because we do have a commercial lease in our theatre. Just for your interest, I did an analysis of just this last financial year, which is not typical, of course, because of COVID. Nonetheless, 67% of use was for film related, and that includes the Nelson Film Society and community film fundraisers, as well as commercial screenings. 22% was lectures, meetings, product launches and the like, and 11% was performance related. So that was dance, theatre and music. So
So, I mean, it always comes down to cost,
Yeah.
doesn't it? If we depend on this, sorry to have to press in here, if we depend on the theatre to generate a certain amount of revenue to keep the suitor solvent, and you ask us to reduce that revenue stream, then we have to ask you, how will that be supported?
Sure.
To make that happen.
Yeah.
And as Julie will point out, the theatre has a lot of overhead costs, some of which will be coming up for renewal, like the screen, which can be enormously expensive, the curtains, which cost tens of thousands of dollars, and they will have to be fire rated, amongst a lot of other things. So when you get down to a community level of theatre and you want all of that to be provided, then it does, you know, it's a capital cost to us.
Great. Thank you very much for spelling that out. Appreciate it.
Thank you for that. And I'll move on to Pete, and I'll just remind people that we're focusing on the statement of intent, which is in front of us. So Pete, if you'd like to ask questions.
Thank you, through the Chair. Thanks very much for all the work that's gone into the SOI. I really appreciate it. I'm looking at page 33 of our agenda, which is page 9 of the SOI, in regards to the early OTC funding. And there was a comment at the bottom of that page that the contract funding level had been at the same level since 2011. My question to you is, so you're coming to the end of a 3-year contract with the MOE. How long have you had 3-year status, so to speak, for that program?
How long is that turning over every 3 years?
Yeah.
Ever since I've been there, I'm thinking. So that's a bit revealing.
Okay. No, that's fine. So it's a fair. I mean,
yes.
My comment being that it's quite a good status to have with the MOE, but you're unsure in terms of after what's going to happen on the 31st of December. You're unsure, one, whether it's going to be funded or whether it's going to be 3-year funding, I presume.
Yeah. Or whether we would be successful in our tendering for that.
Right.
Because each time we've tendered, there's been less providers given MOE support.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So, subsequent question, then, when you say that the contract funding level had been at the same level since 2011, is that higher or lower than what it was prior to that? Was there a reduction? I mean, has it always been the 0.5 position? Was it bigger than that, do you know?
Prior to us receiving MOE funding, we had a private benefactor for education, Paratiho Lodge, and that came to an end. It's always been 0.5, and the amount that the ministry has provided us, as it says in the SOE, hasn't increased each of those contracts we've held. So our costs have gone up, but
so I presume
we're subsidising more.
So I presume you would have got CPI adjustment on.
No.
Oh, interesting. Well, can I just ask then, through the Chair, to staff that, I mean, I personally and my family truly appreciate that EOTC program. It's been fantastic for our family, and I know for hundreds of other Nelson families, as is the program at the museum. I'm very interested in the outcome of what happens here. So just to highlight that, we do need to know what's going on in this regard, because if lobbying needs to happen, I would truly relish the opportunity to help out with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. The Mayor.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm just wondering, there's just a couple of things I just need to check with the Chief Financial Officer. I'm just wondering if we could take a brief adjournment just so I can do that. I just in terms of the accounts, I've just got some questions that I know I'll need to put to Nikki Harrison, but they may not be relevant. I just need to make sure I've got things
Okay, we'll have a quick, 2-minute adjournment? 5 minutes? Okay, we'll take a 5-minute adjournment. Okay, welcome back everybody. Sorry for that little adjournment. We're actually going to head now over to Gail to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I just noticed sitting here on page 46 that we, on the line with depreciation, that there was a depreciation allowed for in the books of the SUTA, and in our long-term plan we did not do that. So we just wanted to clarify that. So Nikki Harrison is going to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Nikki.
So through the chair, just so there's probably a little bit of a tidy up that needs to happen in the SUTA accounts for the depreciation accrual income line that they've got for the first 3 years of the SOI, just to be consistent with our long-term plan. As elected members will remember, in our long-term plan, we removed the SUTA depreciation funding grant for the first 3 years of the long-term plan. And I think the intent was if there was additional money or we did have, if there was some urgent need for some renewal funding within the SUTA, that we would potentially look to top it back up, the fund back up then. But it's just to make sure that the accounts are consistent with the long-term plan.
Thank you for that, Officer Harrison. Did you have any more questions, Gail?
No, I just wanted to make sure that it was clarified in the in this particular statement of intent before we signed it out. Just get it right.
Thank you. Okay, now Kate, you had a question?
Yes, I had a question. Thank you. In our on page 23 of our agenda, in our statement of intent, we asked about sustainability 1.13. We'd like to understand how you're addressing sustainability, including carbon emissions and waste minimisation. And I see your response on page 43 of our agenda, which is page 19 of yours, that you've got an audit happening to identify possible energy savings and carbon emissions mitigation opportunities. I'd just like you to expand a little bit on that, and also best practice procedures for recycling, minimising waste with varying degrees of success. So curious what's working, what's not working, and what the more formal and structured approach to sustainability will be.
We're just about to embark on the ECOS audit. That's going to take place in October, but we're already starting to work with them. And we're looking forward to hopefully some measures that we can put in to further reduce our carbon footprint. We're also working quite hard on trying to make improvements in our air conditioning, or HVAC, which is one of our bigger consumers of energy. Some areas are going to be a little bit more tricky, particularly in freighting of artworks, care and freighting of artworks.
Yeah.
But we're looking at, other products and ways of doing that that don't involve bubble wrap and other plastics and foams. And we're also looking, for instance, in retail at the sorts of products that we stock, in the line of production of those, and working with suppliers. So we've got a number of things sort of underway at the same time as we're getting the audit done. And then we look forward to seeing what recommendations they might make as well.
Great. So with the varying degrees of success, has there been some stumbling blocks where things have worked and haven't worked as well as you'd hoped? Is that stuff like packaging? Like, I know there's quite a big movement to look at potato starch packaging, that kind of, or paper bubble wrap rather than it being plastic bubble wrap. So is packaging something which you've managed to successfully transition to recyclable products?
Not entirely in the freight artwork care area.
Okay. So it's a journey.
I beg your pardon?
It's a journey.
Okay, thank you for that. We're just going to continue moving forward on the changes that have come forward since the previous time we looked at the statement of advice. So Mel, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through to Julie, and thank you for your presentation today and being here. I want to ask two questions, and one's around on page 31 of your statement of intent. At the bottom there, you make reference to the marketing and promotion and is focused around promoting the suitor as a visitor attraction and letting people know what's happening there, and so it goes on. And you've mentioned it, it's peppered several times through this document. Do you at any stage, what's your working relationship with the Nelson Regional Development Agency? Do you avail yourselves of their services?
I've commented several times on this. One of the silver linings of COVID has been more collaborative working relationships with NRDA, Uniquely Nelson and so forth. So we've been working really effectively with them, and that's one of the big step changes, I think, for the suitor has been seeing the suitor as a key tourism destination or attraction. And I have to sheet back big thanks to NRDA, Uniquely Nelson, and some of the initiatives that they've put in place, working closely with us, with influencers visiting, and other initiatives like that, and 3D look-throughs, and all sorts of things going on. So yes, we do. We have been working closely with them.
Thank you for that, because I did miss the fact that you specifically mentioned them by name. I missed that in the report. I looked for it, but I didn't find it. But anyway, I'm pleased that relationship is strong. That's excellent. My next question is in relation to, oh yes, this excites me, page 28, and it's to do with your working relationship with the makeshift spaces, the art walk. What's your involvement in that and your thoughts on that?
It's a partnership, and I hope you've enjoyed the opportunity to go out there and see that. Councillor Bowwater's holding up the pamphlets. And it's been so successful that our borders are now considering the potential for us to move the idea, at least into the Tasman district. But it won't be an art walk, it'll be an art trail.
Can you tell us how many art pieces there are up on display?
Currently 26.
Plan to have more?
Possibly, but both Makeshift and ourselves would need to raise or generate more funds from the community and grants and so forth in order to enable that to happen.
Thank you for that. That's awesome news. I'm going to hand this over to Judy as the final questions before we move in.
So my first question actually is for staff. So just in light of the comments that were made by Officer Harrison earlier, do we need to amend the resolution to say as amended at the meeting, or we've got a fourth one? Okay, so I'm happy to move the resolutions that are up there now. Thank you for that additional resolution. I didn't have a further question.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Pete? Thank you. Do we have people that would like to move into debate? Okay, we'll have the right of reply.
Thank you. It's a simple thing, and sometimes it gets overlooked in a document, but just reflecting on your vision and purpose on our agenda pages 29, and sometimes they can be overlooked, those statements that we see so often. And to be a high quality visitor destination where art matters, I mean, that just so resonates for me. And I just want to thank you for having that as your vision, because I actually think it's critically important. And similarly, your purpose to bring people and art together. by honouring our cultural and artistic heritage, etc. Again, I think that's really important statements, and sometimes they can get buried in with everything else. And yep, we ask you to do smart objectives and measures, etc., etc. But coming back to who you are as an organisation, that is great vision, great purpose, and yeah, just really appreciative that that is why you exist. Also just wanted to note section 3.5, the collaborations and partnerships. And I think that's something that we continue to learn and develop, just the importance of those partnerships. And it's been great to see the makeshift one. I know you've always had a really good, close relationship with the museum, and just developing those is going to be really important for the future. I did also just want to just mention the theatre use, and I'm aware that the theatre actually, wasn't actually set up as a performing arts venue, and just note that we're actually doing a gap analysis and a review of our arts strategy. And I think the discussion for me was really about, do we have performing arts venues rather than actually about the suitor per se. So I'm really looking forward to that gap analysis work being done, as well as the review of our arts strategy. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Julie and Gabrielle, for coming in, and thank you, Dr. Robinson, for presenting the report. I'm now going to put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're now going to have a brief adjournment while we reshuffle the chairing roles. So please get yourself a cuppa or have a rest break, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Can I have us back at the table, please? Are we live streaming again? Yes, we are. Thank you, everyone. We now move to report item 9, winding up of Nelson Municipal Band Trust, on page 62 and 69 to 69 of your agenda. I'd like to invite, and they're already there, welcome, Tanya Robinson, officer, to speak to this report. We have Trust Rachel Reese. Sorry, it's David. Oh, I've actually got it written down so I could remember. I'd also like to acknowledge we have David Todd, who's the Municipal Band Trustee, and Roger Cole, who's a Treasurer in attendance. Welcome. How did I go? Yes. Thank you, Tanya. Do you have anything you'd like to highlight from the report to bring to the councillors' attention, please?
No, I think you're probably all fairly familiar with it. We've got, as you know, a fabulous municipal band that already exists. The band is separate from this trust, and the trust have obviously been supporting the band over time. So this is really about making a decision about the fund that the trust manage.
Thank you. Any comments from the other members sitting at the table report?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Roger Cole, Secretary Treasurer. I'm reluctant to wind the trust up. I'm in my 40th year as Secretary Treasurer of this trust. It started when I was Deputy City Treasurer and picked this up in 1982. But it's become completely uneconomic, as in the report. Initially, we were getting 28-30% interest on our funds at contributory mortgages with legal firms. Those sort of interest rates, one can dream about them, but they just they just ain't there anymore. And the council is kindly paying me about $500 a year to look after the administration of this trust, and the trust's likely to earn about $500 in interest next year, which is a bit pointless. I'd emphasise again that the trust is completely independent of the band. The relationship between the council and the band is untouched and is very important. But the support that the trust can give to the band is now more appropriate that the band take over and administer these funds to their best advantage. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not quite there yet, but thank you. Any other comments to be made? No, we're quite comfortable where we're sitting on that one.
If I could, Madam Chair, just as patron and trustee, I'd have to say this is, I think we're making the right call here in terms of the trustees, in terms of the next steps for the trust. I just want to emphasise a couple of things. One is that Roger has given 40 years worth of service to maintaining this trust, and it is the most efficient and effective meeting that I attend all year as we have our annual meeting. I'm very grateful for the support of Roger through that period. I also want to just emphasise that the relationship between Nelson City Brass and Nelson City Council is a key civic relationship, and there is no intention to diminish that relationship by this change. It's really important that as the trust winds up, that as we transfer this across into what will be a contract relationship, we just strengthen and make sure that that is captured so that for councils of the future, they understand how important and enduring this relationship is, and we maintain our civic commitment to the band.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll capture that in the minutes. Now, committee, are there any questions for Brian, Judine, then Brian?
Thank you very much for that. In the officer's report, one of the disadvantages, it just mentions that the band would not have a fund to call on. And I'm just wondering if there are any sort of identified risks around I guess, ongoing funding. I would assume you get sort of subs and grants and performance fees and things like that for the brass do, and so that there shouldn't be an impact by not having this fund to call on. It's just because it was listed as a disadvantage.
Yeah, certainly there's no problem with our continuation. The $500 or $1,000 that we've been getting every year has been helping, but we're like all voluntary groups trying to find fundraising from everywhere you can. So no, there's no ongoing problems from that point of view.
Lovely, thank you.
Brian.
Yeah, just a couple of questions from me. Just thinking about contributing more. You talk about dream days. I remember them as a nightmare. I'm just wondering, did you look at the option of actually varying the trust deed? Because when I go through the trust deed, it just talks about the only revenue that goes to the trust is basically the interest or the return, so basically the capital. I'm just wondering about altering considering the trust deed where you can actually just draw down on the capital fund to make a donation and just keep the trust as a separate entity.
Well, there are administrative costs in keeping the trust as a separate entity. And if the council's happy to continue to pay me $500 a year to look after that, although I'm 76 this month. So I would not be continuing in that role for much longer. I'd like to have hit 40 years, but never mind. Yeah. But there just doesn't seem to us to be any point in keeping the trust. It's outlived its usefulness, to be frank.
It's useful at a time, but
that's very useful at the time. But when we were getting 28-30%, but yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you. Anyone second? Councillor Noonan, happy to move, and Julian Edgar, happy to second. And is there any debate from anyone? Yes, and then, is this right to reply or is this debate? Debate. Oh, your whole, yeah, so this is debate. Okay.
Yes, just speaking of your support, and thank you for all the work you're doing and continue the work and etc. So and thank you for coming along. But,
anything? No? Yes, thank you, Tim. And Gail.
Thank you. Look, I'm Paige, you might have a conflict of interest. Reason being, I live next door to where they practice, and I actually really enjoy listening to the brass band. It's actually one of my special things. So whenever they play, they are amazing. So look, talking about the trust itself, the trustees have requested that it be done. It seems prudent to do so. So I'm quite happy to support what seems a very pragmatic thing to do. And in saying that, Roger, outstanding, being treasurer so long, and this is only one of the things that you do in our city. So thank you very much, and to David for being a trustee for quite some time, I think, and for Rachel, who is the patron, is the role of being mayor. So not just want to thank the trustees for the time, but it does make sense to do this. So I'm sure you'll use the money very wisely.
Thank you for your kind words, Councillor Noonan. And yes, we all have appreciated the time spent by the people involved. So, moved. We are now up to winding up, and I would like the recommendation that we have, the Community and Recreation Committee receive, approve, requests trustees. So we will receive the report, approves the recommendation made by the trustees, and request the trustees to wind up the Nelson Municipal Bus Band Trust and distribute remaining funds to Nelson City Brass. Can I have, what is the next thing I need to be doing? Put it. I'm just shooting through these pages I've got, people. So I'd like to put the motion to all those in favour. Carried.
Madam Chair, before the trustees leave, can I just add a little bit of news, so to speak, regarding the band?
Most certainly we have closed that.
So the band recently competed at the National Brass Band competitions and came 5th in the A grade section out of 10 bands, 10 A grade bands from around New Zealand. When I first started getting involved with the band, because my kids were coming through the youth program, was back in 2017. The band won the C grade. In 2019, they won the B grade in Hamilton, which was a phenomenal win. And as a result of that, the Brass Band Association put them up to A grade, regardless of whether the band wanted to or not. And this year, essentially out of 33 bands, I think there were, or something like that, at the national competitions, the band came 5th in A grade. This is against the top big bands from Auckland and Wellington. It's a phenomenal success. And all due credit to Nigel Weeks and the band members. I think they need to be commended for an outstanding result.
Thank you, Pete. I think a round of applause. There we go.
Could I, on behalf of the band, I'm a playing member of the band as well and treasurer. Thank you to the council for your support. We really appreciate it, and it's been a great journey. I must admit, this last 5 years since Nigel's been here, and it's had its ups and downs. But the band is in good heart, and we appreciate the support and what we can do for the community. So thanks once again.
Thank you, David Roger. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time. Now we'll move to item report number 10 in the agenda. It's approval of the draft Out and About track strategy for community feedback. And I'd like to invite, Paul Harrington and David Allen to the table. As Paul is the author, he will be speaking to the report, and in attendance we have Mr. David Allen from Global Leisure Group. And welcome to the table. And so, do you have anything that you wish to highlight? I know that there's been an amendment. Anything you wish to highlight about the report?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If I just run through a few aspects of the report, probably for a few minutes, and then open it up to questions if that's good.
Absolutely.
Just before I start, I'd just like to introduce David Allen from Global Leisure Group, GLG. He's been helping out, Global Leisure Group's been helping out with the report with the strategy over the last year, really. It's been a long time coming. And if I can also just introduce Carol Stewart, who's joined our team. Carol's going to be helping out with the strategy as we move forward. She's come to us from Auckland and has been with us for about a month and has replaced Nathan Murray, who left us a few months ago. So this paper relates to the draft Out and About on Track strategy, which we're ready to take up to the community for feedback. And the decision relates to approving the draft version. And I'd also like to add an additional recommendation, which is up on the screen, just around minor amendments, which I'll talk to a bit later. I thought it would be useful just to run through briefly the 2016 strategy, the original one, and then talk through the process for the review and also discuss the proposed changes in the review document. And I just want to outline something at the outset that the key thing to keep in mind with regard to the document is it is very much a strategy. So for trails that are proposed in this strategy and the final strategy, it's a starting point. So after it's included in the strategy, we still need to have further investigation, consents, designation approvals from the Forestry subcommittee, and indeed from the landowners. So approval in the strategy in the final does not mean a green light to go and build something. So in 2015, Council adopted the Out and About strategy. That's a strategy for active travel on pathways and roads and footpaths. And at the time, it became evident that we needed to have one for recreation trails as well. So that's where the Out and About on Track strategy was developed. It's recreation based and it addressed issues relating to recreation. So user conflict, demand for new trails, that sort of thing. The 2016 strategy did this by promoting courtesy on trails, introducing channeling on some trails, so some would be walking only, some biking only, and introduced a procedure for new trails as well. So there's quite a procedure that people have to go through when they want to develop a trail, and the key thing is that they have to have an MOU with the landowner, and that MOU talks about the grade of the trail, the construction, who's responsible for building it, the maintenance, and that sort of thing. But that's the last step. The MOU comes in when all the other consents and approvals and environmental investigations have been done. So the output of that strategy was a strategy document and then a schedule of trails and other actions, and then some maps as well. And as noted, a proposed trail in the strategy doesn't mean it's going to be built. And there's two examples in the 2016 one that are still being investigated. There's P7 through the Wakapuaka Sandflats and P28, which is one between Barnacote and Third House. So that was included, but it's by no means a done deal, and they may or may not happen. So as far as the process for the review goes, David's been leading the engagement with stakeholders, which has been ongoing for at least a year. And there's quite a few themes that have come out of those discussions, which I'll address in a minute. And those themes were subsequently discussed with the Biodiversity Forum, and I presented in a paper to the Te Auhu Taiahui, and also workshopped with this committee in December. So a draft has now been prepared, and we're proposing to seek wider feedback from the community. And we don't feel that needs an overly cumbersome process, given the amount of work we've done already with stakeholders. We think a Shape Nelson page and some social media. And then we'd record that feedback after it's come in, bring it back to committee with officer comments and any recommendations, and then propose changes to the draft for a final version to be adopted. So the draft that's in front of you today, in many ways, it reflects that a lot has changed since 2016. Mountain biking has continued to grow. The Mountain Bike Club's developed a master plan in the interim of trails that it wishes to develop. We've done a lot of work with Koata Limited, Ngāti Koata, to enable continued access on its land. A report by Bearl's been undertaken, which has really put a light on the value of mountain biking to the Nelson community and the wider region. A lot of new trails have been developed. We've acquired new land on the brook side of the Grampians, and we'll be looking to develop that for the public. In that time, the Forestry Advisory Group was set up as well. Now the Forestry Subcommittee. We've undertaken audits of grades, trail grades for mountain bikes, which is coming to an end now. And of course, there's been COVID and the impacts on visitors and events that's caused. The discussions with stakeholders that we've had some really great feedback, and a number of themes have come out of that. One is that reports of conflict on trails have reduced, relationships appear to have improved, and just a better sense of understanding between user groups. Generally, stakeholders felt that the strategy is still valid, not really a need for wholesale change, but there were certainly some gaps. One of those gaps is that there's a greater balance in the network is needed. So by that we mean there's not enough easy grade trails in Nelson, and the grade audits we've recently done for mountain biking really highlight that. Also, an increased environmental lens is needed, particularly around giving the go-ahead for new trails. The relationship with Ngāti Koata is really important on an ongoing basis, and because of the popularity of mountain biking, other users are still feeling a bit marginalised in some reserves as well. So the key changes in the revised document is the establishment of a Trails Advisory Group that we're proposing. The Trails Advisory Group, excuse me, would consist of recreation group members like walkers, runners, the clubs and the Cycle Trails Trust, environmental representatives and landowners. That group would help prioritise new trails and also help with decisions on whether they should go ahead or not, and oversee the strategy implementation. The group would also be able to report back to landowners and others on different issues and themes. So the strategy promotes an increase of supply of easier grade trails, and one that we're progressing this year is the Maitai Valley floor route up to the Maitai hub. So we're upgrading that group to try and make an easy grade 2 sort of route for families. Also looking to make the Grampians and Eureka Park just for walking and pedestrian only, so stopping cycling in those areas. We've already done that in a soft approach with the Eureka Park when we upgraded it last year, but the Grampians is probably a fairly significant change. There's not a lot of biking in the Grampians. It's very, very low use, and we do get a lot of feedback from walkers that they're startled by bikers when they do turn up. And the strategy really just promotes that as walking only, because there is a lot of mountain biking already in Nelson, and that could be a domain just to set aside. We've also introduced environmental maps into the strategy. These aren't regulatory maps, they're just a heads up to users and people who want to build new trails that these are areas that are going to need a lot of scrutiny. Another colour shows areas that need some, and the other is sort of an area with no colour that's kind of a bit more open. But I do need to emphasise that that's not a replacement for a resource consent or anything like that. It's really just a guide for users and to raise the profile of environmental management. And there's also minor changes to the vision and aim to reflect those the above points, and the physical works schedule has been updated. Is that better? So the recommendation before you, sorry, I'm at the end now. Yeah, the recommendation is simply that the draft strategy is approved for community feedback, and I was just proposing to add another one, a recommendation to enable minor amendments being made prior to the draft going out, and the wording there delegates the chief executive or chair. That's just around, yeah, that's fine. Just to make any necessary amendments prior to the release. And that's to accommodate any feedback that's come in after the agenda went out. And an example of that is to clarify that any proposed trails through forestry land would need to be approved through the forestry subcommittee, which we consider a minor change because it happens anyway and would, as a matter of course, as it has in the past. So hopefully there's no great surprises in the strategy from the workshop in December. And I'm happy to take any questions. I might just check with David if he's got anything to add at this point. No?
Thank you. Just having a little bit of a comment about the final amendment. Is there anything we want to change that? No? Yep. Okay. Firstly, we will go to questions and then, or yeah, okay, so questions I have on my list, Galtum, Judine and Rachel Sanson and Matt, and who's next? And Kate and Mel. Alrighty.
Yeah, so my first question is...
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I'm just looking at the what you're asking us to do today, and with the feedback that you're going to seek from the public, are you going to be taking out? Because that says to me that you're going to be taking out those 3 documents to the public for feedback. Is that the intention?
Correct. Through the chair, it should be one document, and 2 of the other ones are actually part of the document, but they are presented separately at this point.
Okay, so it's your intention to be quite fulsome in what you're
absolutely.
giving. Okay.
So it will be the strategy document, the schedule of physical works and the maps.
Okay, that's great. Can you tell me what the Ps mean? They've got different numbers.
Proposed trail. Yeah,
but they've got different numbers.
Correct.
So what do they mean?
The numbers are just sequential references for the
Okay, so you might want to put a key, because I looked at it and thought, I don't know what any of those mean. I thought they were numbered, but I didn't know whether they had any relevance to anything else. So that would be, yeah, just that they're numbered tracks. That's all they are. They're just numbered tracks. Cool. They're not the length or no.
No, sorry, through the chair. Is this the ID column in the table?
Oh, what page?
So page
I probably skipped that
96.
entirely. 96. Oh, okay, so they relate to the maps. Cool. Okay, that's great. The only other question I've got, look, I think we've come a long way and it's really, really good. So I just wanted to say that, and I will say a little bit more in debate. My question is relating to the Maitai Valley floor proposal, and whether the proposal is to have walking, and I know that's well walked, that one, so I was just wondering, is there any more detail? It just sort of was just that you're going to develop one. Is there a proposal to have separate walking in some places, or?
Yes, through the chair. There's some areas where we're looking to do a separation to enable where the track's quite narrow around, for example, Sunday Hole at this point. But there's a bit of work to do on that, and we're actually engaging the Nelson Tasman Cycle Trails Trust to help us investigate that, because they're well accustomed to developing grade 2 routes.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. Before we go to the next question, just bring your attention, Paul, we're making a change to the third clause recommendation. So just make sure that we get that right before we, are we going to hold on that? Yeah? Okay, now it's up. So you see that there's been a change made there, the group managing services, and you're comfortable with that change that's been made through your amendments? And deputy co-chairs. No? Yes,
Just to clarify on that, is it or is it?
Can we just take a quick adjournment on this, because I just think we need to get this wording right, and I'm just not quite sure of the time frame. Right, we're back streaming live. After adjournment, this is what we've come up for the third clause of the recommendation to the committee. Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Harrington? Paul?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So shall we continue with questions? Tim? Thank you.
Right. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, section 6 of the report on proposed public feedback. It just mentioned, Shake Nelson, our Nelson social media. It didn't mention whether we would also write to the stakeholders that are listed on page 73. Can we? I mean, you probably were going to do that, but it's not mentioned under proposed public feedback. So I think it's important that all of those, well, not necessarily Rotorua District Council, but all of those stakeholders, including the Nelson Biodiversity Forum, are specifically emailed to know that it's gone out for consultation. Here's the final version or a link to it, and those submission things. So thank you that that's going to be included. And my next one is just on, and it may be outside the scope of this strategy, and that might be your answer. But I guess what I didn't see within the schedule of physical works or overly mentioned was, I guess, what I would call sort of some of the ancillary services. Now, the Mai Tai hub is mentioned, which is great, but I guess some of those key ancillary services are toilets, is wayfinding and things like that. And I, sort of other than that bullet point about the Mai Tai, I didn't get a strong flavour of that. And I can't speak on behalf of mountain bikers, but as a walker, wayfinding and toilets are frequently beneficial ancillary services, especially if you walk for several hours. So is that something that would belong within this strategy, or have I missed something?
Through the chair, I'm just trying to find it, but there is wayfinding in the implementation plan somewhere, and there is a recognition that it's requiring work. I think it might be under the strengthen communication. Number 6 on page 93. Upgrade wayfinding signage to access the track network within the network and include the 3 C's in wayfinding, which is courtesy, consideration, and yeah. So it is recorded in there, and it is something that we're well aware of, and we're hoping to, for example, look at the Grampians in the next year or two to try and do a wholesale upgrade of it. As far as toilets goes, I don't think the toilets are specifically addressed in the strategy.
Through the chair, in terms of the toilets, ancillary facilities are mentioned in the implementation plan as well under some of the recommendations. So the schedule of works is more around the trails focus, giving that focus on that, and the other works which will be done are actually in the main implementation plan recommendations, because they are usually a wraparound of multiple different items, including toilets, clean wash down, etc. in terms of facilities, just like the Brook has now.
Yeah, I guess I'm just, as we develop this for walkers as well, we probably don't need as much wash down, but yeah, toilets. So just considering those, and maybe just for that number 6 on page 93, we might want to put what the 3 C's are. Thank you.
Thank you, Judine. Rachel Sanson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Paul and David. Thanks for all of your work on this. It's a great strategy, and I can see it's been an immense amount of work, so thanks for that. So my first question is on page 77, under it's 6.3, the proposed public feedback. And I was just curious as to, once the consultation ends, is there some way that elected members will be able to view the feedback? I'm assuming it'll be summarised into a report, but do elected members have access to the actual, let's say, the raw feedback?
Through the chair, generally, I will have to check with our communications team and get back to you, but there is a requirement when we go out for feedback that we need to let people know that it will become public information. But quite often what we do is we attach the full feedback as an attachment to the report and then summarise it within the report as a table and then have suggested changes.
Okay, that's really great, thanks. My next question is on page 88, and maybe not page 88. I can't actually. It's the page that talks about new tracks to avoid significant natural areas. And then on page 136, there is a map showing the significant natural area. It's my understanding that council's undertaking commercial forestry in that area, which is a significant natural area. So I was just wondering why mountain biking would not be a permissible activity if something as impactful as forestry is permissible in a significant natural area.
Just redirect that question if I can.
So this report is on the out and about on track strategy. So I note the comment, but I don't think officers can speak to that particular question. This is about out and about on track strategy.
Yeah. So the question is, why is mountain biking not permitted and not seen as a permissible activity in a significant natural area, given that council is undertaking far more impactful activities in a significant natural area? I mean, I'm just curious, like.
Through the chair, I would have to know exactly which area you're talking about, because it may be a retired forestry area and it may, I would have to have more information around exactly which area it was.
Sure. I mean, just looking at page 136, there's a big swath of the roading in Maitai.
Yep, just the high priority conservation area on page 136, I would think has very little forestry in it, if any.
Is that not the roading valley?
It's the roading catchment.
Yeah, okay.
No, you might be right, there might be some.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure there is. I cross-referenced it against the forestry maps, but that's okay. I'm happy to move on. My next question is page 92, and it talks about forestry in the out and about strategy. So where it talks about it says a significant number of tracks are located within plantation forest, and I was just wondering if that's talking about council land or other landholders or both.
Through the chair, that is the predominant forestry area in the recreation estate is on Kowata land. So that statement is more relevant to that, but it relates to both.
Okay.
But only because the vast majority of the forestry land is on private land.
And so there was, I think, Paul, you might be able to expand on this after we've had questions, but you did mention when you came in that there was going to be some changes, like that tracks have to be approved through the forestry subcommittee. But I'm assuming that the forestry subcommittee is only looking at council forestry.
That's correct.
So what's the mechanism for tracks to be, I guess, approved on, say, Kowata land, for example?
Through the chair, the final decision would be with the landowner.
Sure.
So they have their own process for that.
Okay. And so then I guess I was just wondering why, like it says in here that a number of tracks are located on plantation forest, and I was wondering whether more accurate might be a number of plantation forests are located within public recreational reserves, because these are public recreational reserves that happen to have council undertaking commercial forestry activity, and I'm just trying to understand why when I think about the four well-beings, so economic, environmental, social and cultural, on all of those measures, mountain biking seems to be far more beneficial. It's significantly more economically beneficial, far better environmentally, better obviously socially and culturally. So why is forestry kind of trumping mountain biking in terms of use and access to these?
Can I just ask, please let this be the last question, Rachel. Is this something, an area that we are moving off course? Are we still in the correct area of where we should be discussing?
I think it's a really good point, and that's that the recreation is occurring on private land, and that land is held for the purpose of forestry. I mean, the Ngāti Koata lease that land to a forestry company, and that's their primary source of income off the land. So it's really important that people recognise that the trails that are on that land are a privilege.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Paul. I appreciate that. And then in regards to council land, where we have plantation forests on council, like public reserve land, I guess I'm trying to understand why forestry trumps recreational use on public reserve land, council land.
Through the chair, the council a long time ago made a decision to establish forestry on that land. When it's operational, the recreation plays second fiddle. It's as simple as that. It's health and safety. There's all sorts of things happening. So the amendment that I mentioned as an example earlier is simply that council has a mechanism, a governance body to look after its forestry, and if there's a trail proposed within that area, that would certainly have to come through that group.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you. Matt.
Thank you, Von. Thanks, guys. So page 76 talks about the strategies, one of the strategies priorities to explore potential for a partnership with Koata Limited to enable continued recreational use of some of its whenua where appropriate, which sounds great. But I'm just thinking, how does that sit with the agreement that we have formed with them in recent times where we pay them a lease for access to those trails?
Through the chair, that's a really good question. Firstly, we don't have a lease with them. We have an agreement for access. Yeah, and we probably wouldn't. I mean, it's very difficult to. I'm getting off track a bit, but there is already a major leaseholder on that land, so a lease is a tricky one. We have a temporary interim agreement, and it's a year-by-year agreement. We're looking to work with, and we have started working with Koata on a longer-term agreement that wouldn't have to be renewed every year. So it's very early stages, but Koata and the council are both positive on that.
Great. And do you think that future agreement might increase our opportunities for recreation?
Through the chair, it's just too early. This year we have funding in through the LTP to investigate that, and we're just kicking it off now.
Okay, cool. Through the chair, so I can't help but also think about this through an economic lens. And if you think about the 2018 Bell report on mountain biking in Nelson, it found that the sport was worth $15.5 million to the city. Mountain biking is worth $43 million to Rotorua, and 60% of their visitors are domestic. So I get quite excited about that opportunity for Nelson. Does this strategy help us actually develop economically as well as recreation?
Through the chair, not my area of expertise, but I do recall reading in the Bell report that we needed more entry-level trails and we needed trailhead facilities, and those are two things that are promoted in the strategy. David, do you have any other insights into that?
Yeah, I think there's two key things here through the chair. Firstly is having suitable infrastructure to support the actual activity, and that's, I think, what Councillor Edgar was asking before about the ancillary facilities, the RAP. The other thing is around the balance in the track network, which is what we've addressed quite strongly in the refresh of the strategy, and that is for those people who are looking for a less challenging actual ride or walk, for that matter. And so those people having developments like the Mai Tai, for instance, may enable them to stay for an extra night because they actually see another branch to their activity. So that's where you start getting those, again, multiplier effects and increasing it. Rotorua has put a lot of investment into the support infrastructure and the promotion. And we've got a recommendation here about a promotion plan to bring more events, to bring more people to it. The other thing, of course, is just the sheer weight of numbers, the proximity of Rotorua to Hamilton, Tauranga, Auckland in terms of the domestic markets. So it's a drive as opposed to a fly to get to those places. So you've got those factors that come in here around their level of return from their activity. But it does come down to a lot around how much you invest to then get the return in terms of the economic side of it, from what we can see from being a lay economist rather than a real economist.
So through Yvonne, do you think we're investing enough to get that kind of a future return?
I think that's up to the Board of Governors here on the table rather than to us. I think from our perspective, you've got to balance out where you put your money. I think it's the most important thing at this stage is where you actually prioritise the spend that you can afford. And that's the key thing.
Okay, great. The feedback I get a lot from mountain bikers is that we build these great trails and then they get shredded. They just get smashed because so many people are riding mountain bikes. And then we don't maintain them as well as we could. And then the trails aren't that good. Does this strategy help address that issue?
Through the chair, there is a focus on maintenance in here, but the LTP also addresses it because we've doubled the maintenance, one of the maintenance contracts value, and we've also increased our renewals GL as well. So I think we're in a better place now than we were a few years ago.
Okay, last question from me for now anyway, is a lot of that damage gets done when people are riding wet trails, and there's kind of a code that you shouldn't ride the trails when they're really wet, but lots of people they're addicted to mountain biking and they go anyway. Is there anything in the strategy which talks about, or has any thought been given to actually closing them more often when they are totally saturated and vulnerable?
Through the chair, no, I don't think we have really considered. I mean, we will if there's a real risk to people, but I don't think we've considered closing if there's a risk to the trails. But it is something that's really worth thinking about, I think. And we have upped the comms recently on when we had some wet weather recently. We put some social media and we tag all the relevant entities and say please stay off the trails for a few days. But yeah, I'd hope not to have to close it. But yeah, it's something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Kate.
Oh, thank you. Yvonne, through the chair. Look, I have a couple of questions. I think it's an excellent strategy. Well done. A lot of work's gone into this, and it's you've really crossed a lot of different fields and already tried to take. I know you've already consulted with the Biodiversity Forum and tried to get a lot of input to get to this point. So my first question is, at the Biodiversity Forum in December, we did discuss this and there were some concerns raised. Paul, can you just highlight to me, did you meet with Debs and maybe some other members of the forum after and resolve that? I see that you have a strong theme in your key principle that significant natural areas are generally avoided, and the sensitive areas of high biodiversity, ecosystems and geological values are protected. So you've got that really strongly messaged in the strategy already. Do you feel like you've landed at a place where Forest and Bird are happy with the outcome? Perhaps you could highlight to me in the maps what tracks are proposed, because I'm struggling to see.
Through the chair, just on the first part of that, following the Biodiversity Forum meeting, I basically said to the forum, if anyone wants to be involved, let me know. Forest and Bird did. So yes, we did meet with Debs and we've had discussions. We have landed at a place, I have to say this is a recreation strategy and it won't be all things to all people. We've landed at a place where I think is a good balance.
Yeah.
It's not a regulatory document that's going to say yes or no on an environmental basis, but we've incorporated, especially since the 2016 one, there's a real focus on the environment now. Okay. So I think we're at a point where we need to put the draft out and feedback from Forest and Bird may well come in and we can look at that when we bring it back as a final sorry, I didn't quite get the second question around which trail.
So I was just, when I'm looking at the maps, I just wondered if you could, is the trail which Debs was particularly concerned about the one, like I've got page 136 of our agenda, which shows the significant natural areas, but I can't quite figure out when I look at the other maps. I feel like it might be map.
I probably couldn't answer that today. I think it would probably be best for Forest and Bird to come in with their specific feedback on the trails rather than me try and identify.
Okay.
But there will be one or two that she's concerned about. The Kawata land environmental maps really just maps their SNAs, and the council map, the environmental map, is a bit broader, but it includes the SNAs, so far as I'm aware of.
Okay, so can you just explain them? So, but it would have been map 6. Is that P? So P3. I'm a little confused by map 6 because it says P3 on the map, but then it says priority 1 and priority 3 in the code. So, are those two proposed new trails through the SNA, which is map? The last page, 136 of our agenda.
Yeah, so through the chair, sorry, the P3 is not a priority. It's unfortunate that priority and proposed the same letter, but P3 is just a label, which is the identification. That trail is a unique one because it's sort of one or the other. There's two routes that the trust are exploring to get from the Pelorus into the city. Yeah. So they're looking at one or the other, and none of them are a given. That is what they're looking at the moment. So that's why there's two versions on the map. But it's a priority 1 because we see it as a really great rides link type trail.
A great link.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. My second question is around climate change, and I note in your report that you've got some, and I just have to find my notes. So you've got some great sort of connections to the Biodiversity Forum Strategy plus the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum's Overarching Aims. And in your implementation plan, and I think it is, I just have to find my piece of paper. Yeah, so in your implementation plan, page 91 of our agenda, you talk about the implementation plan will be guided by the Nelson Climate Change Charter. And picking up on Matt's questions around economic benefits, I'm just wondering in 4.3 with your desired outcomes, whether you've explored the opportunities for regenerative economic benefits and ecotourism. I feel like there could have been a stronger theme of that, as mountain biking is potentially climate positive, and it's a really great way of promoting ecotourism. Did you reflect on that? And because you talk quite a lot about COVID and our response to COVID, and I'm just surprised that we haven't got a stronger theme of the opportunities in terms of creating.
Through the chair, I mean, it's something we could either, yeah, it hasn't really been strongly considered. I guess there is an ecotourism element to it for locals. I guess people that are flying here to go mountain biking, maybe not so much, but it wasn't a great focus on that aspect. But if the committee wanted us to add some words in, we could certainly do that.
Yeah, I think it's just a really important part of this piece of work that we're thinking about what tourism is going to look like into the future, and so it's about generating regenerative economic benefits, including from ecotourism. For me, that would be an amazing outcome to see mountain biking as part of. I know that there's quite a lot of work being done with Project Kukuri in that area. So connecting this into that. Particularly as you've got your implementation plan being guided by the Nelson Climate Change Charter.
Chair, I'm happy to move what we've got in front of us.
Noted, thank you. Moved by Tim, seconded
I'm
by
in the middle of
Gail.
asking questions, yeah.
Are there any, we've still got list of questions to be asked. So, Mel?
I've got one more question. Sorry. So I'm just
Okay.
wondering.
I'm not going to say I'm aware of time, but I am aware of time. But I'm just thinking I'm allowing the questions we have.
Yeah.
For the sheer fact that I should imagine that debate would be less because we've all virtually going to be having our time now to ask the questions.
Absolutely.
And a great thoroughness. So I'm just signalling that now, people.
So maybe in your conversation with the Nelson Tasman Climate Forum, you can look at that and how we incorporate sort of leadership in terms of creating recreational activities which are climate positive. I just wanted to touch on page 80 of our agenda, the climate impact statement. I think there was a real opportunity for you to be thinking about how mountain biking is a climate positive activity, and that this is something we should really be supporting for that reason. So it should be part of our climate response plan. So connecting into that as well.
Thank you. I can see. Paul, did you want to answer back on that? I can see you both writing furiously there, which is great.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I've made some notes. I mean, one minor amendment we could do is just where it says tourism, we could say including ecotourism, and for the draft that goes out. I mean, we can discuss that through the chairs. And
that can be a minor amendment that's done through the clause 3 of the recommendation. Thank you. So, Mel, and then Rachel, Theo, Brian, Tim, and Trudy. So.
Right, well, and Darcy.
Yes, Mel, you are next on the list, young man.
You got Darcy too?
I will now put Darcy on the list. Good. So this is really good. Okay, Mel.
Right. Thank you, Paul, for your report today, and also David for the work that he's put into this on track, out and about on track strategy. Excellent. I want to have expanded for me, please, the establishment of this track advisory group. And also, I notice, and I don't know whether you touched on this, Paul, but you're establishing a track user forum too. We've had nothing like this before. This is totally new.
Through the chair, yes, so one of the key themes that came through in the feedback was that people wanted to be more proactive in terms of the different stakeholders, the key stakeholders, around shaping the future network and the specific implementation of particular trails or other infrastructure. So the advisory group is a collection of those stakeholders for that purpose, so that we can then do that in a more collaborative management approach. And the forum really is an opportunity for people to be able to come forward who are interested residents or have got a wider interest in the network and what its impacts are. So that way they can come and do that on an annual basis. So again, it's a checking in process, so that hopefully the work going forward, we're actually more efficient because we've got early intelligence about what's concerning people. So that was what the intent of both those are, in terms of both the intelligence and then how we implement, and shaping it more at that level before it then comes through to a more formal process like with council.
Thank you so much for that. So this will be ongoing, this interaction with these community groups will be ongoing into the future?
Yeah, through the chair, the idea is that the advisory group meets 2-3 times a year, and then it comes forward with suggestions or will consider some of the developments that may arise, not just the ones that are in here, because this is a living process we're going through here. So that's another key element. So it's ongoing. It's not just for a first year. That's the intent.
Does Rotorua have something like this? In their out and about on track strategy?
I don't think so.
Through the chair, they have a group. It's a bit of a different structure in Rotorua. They have a group which is it's similar, but it's different, slightly different because the land ownership is slightly different. Right. But they do have a similar process. For example, for new trails, it's not just decided by the landowner. There's a collaborative approach.
Yes, I'll find just one or two more. I have a lot actually, because I found it. I had difficulty determining what was new in your strategy and what wasn't. And I wasn't sure whether Paul had picked up and highlighted the additions to the already existing strategy, or were there? So please excuse me, the memorandum of understanding, that is already in place, is it?
Correct, yeah. So at the end of a process, if there's a trail in the strategy, it goes through a resource consent, might need various ecological assessments, might need a designation approval. When it goes through all those and it's satisfactory, an MOU is developed between the landowner and the person who's wants to promote the track. And that's just a couple of pages. It sets out the route, it sets out what grade it's going to be, who's going to maintain it on an ongoing basis, when it's going to be reviewed, who's going to build it, and any other matters that are relevant. So that's in place now. It's pretty well ironed out, that process.
Working well. Yeah. Right. Of course, I could go on to non-compliant users of tracks and networks and unauthorised track building. You seem to have, my reading of this, you seem to have nailed it now. You're confident that you've set processes in place now that will manage that challenge for you.
Through the chair, both the council and the mountain bike club are quite proactive, and the mountain bike club have an illegal track policy with implications, and we have ourselves got our own regulatory ways of following it up. It's difficult. It is difficult because they're quite remote places a lot of the time.
Yes.
But it's not easy and it's difficult, but we're definitely actively pursuing it and take it very seriously.
Yes. Look, I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mel. And in fact, I'd like to say that Mel's answered off a lot of questions I had. So if anyone else who wishes to speak and ask questions now, just be aware if they've been asked before and answered. Now is the time to help us along with this. Rachel.
I'll do my best. I won't be too long. Paul, what is an SNA?
Through the chair, a significant natural area.
And where are they showing on the maps?
They are shown underneath the red layer, by and large.
So you take me to one where I can
there's
see.
There's two different, excuse me, sorry, I'm making noise into the microphone, but there's two different maps. There's one for Kawata land and there's one for council land. The Kawata land shows the SNAs in orange, like dark orange.
Can you give me that page number?
Sorry, page
Thanks.
137.
137.
Yep, and it also shows the dock land as an SNA. And the council land, the SNAs are, it's not shown as SNAs because it's shown as a general area working with our environment team that are high conservation priority areas.
Okay, so the SNAs, so when we're looking at those SNAs, why is it called high priority conservation area on the map if it's orange?
Sorry, why is it called
Why is it coded high priority conservation area on the map if it's supposed to show a significant natural area?
Well, it's not showing it as a significant natural area through the chair because that's an RMA term and it's in a process of its own. So.
Yep, it is.
Yep.
So why in the report have we got reference to avoiding SNAs that is not defined, and then we've got maps that are talking about big orange areas that are high conservation areas? I actually want you, before we do this, you're going to need to really be clear whether they're the same thing. So.
Okay, so through the chair, I think the intent was that the Nelson plan, this is going to be an enduring document past the point where the Nelson plan is notified. So whatever SNAs end up in the Nelson plan, I guess that's referring to that.
Well, they're quite different things. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, but a significant natural area, and I'm looking at the wording and it refers to significant natural area, not high conservation areas. So I've got maps with one thing, wording with other things, and we need to be clear about what they are because they're not the same thing. So we need to get that sorted out. I think it's, Mr. White, can you sort that one out for me?
Yes, I understand the point, which is consistency through the document so that it's very clear for the people who are making submissions on it what they're actually submitting on. So if the committee is happy for that to be treated as a minor amendment through that resolution, then I'll put my attention to it.
Well, I think it's a bit more than a minor amendment. I think it's actually for the purposes of this meeting I think you're going to have to be, because if you're looking at the wording and it's not defined, so significant natural area has a meaning under the Act. It's a very specific meaning, and it's a very different thing to a high conservation area. And so for someone trying to interpret that as to what they're doing, I'm not sure whether the meaning, if I go to the words, whether actually what was intended to be avoided, so to not be in them, is a high conservation area or it's a significant natural area. And it would have a totally different outcome in terms of what you were trying to do with the plan. So the comment was made before that we have commercial forest, we've got commercial forest over significant natural areas. That's not correct. We have significant natural areas that are protected within forestry areas, and they will continue to be protected. They're there, and in the process of planting that forest, the council didn't cut them down. They're sitting there. So some of them could be quite small. So some of them you'll know they're like Te Toki Reserve. You'll know there's some little ones that are sitting there, and I'm just not clear on that map. And I'm sorry, it wasn't until the questions sort of headed down that line, and I was trying to work out where SNAs came to, and I found them in the wording in the table. But we just need to be clear on which one is what we're talking about. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, through the chair. Look, I think we can tidy that up through a relatively minor amendment because the maps are supposed to be a high level indication and I've tried to be quite clear in the document that they are not a regulatory map. They are an indication to the mountain bike club or any other entity that wants to build a track that those are areas that are going to need more scrutiny, and that's all they're supposed to be. So we can tidy up the wording.
So can you tell me whether the areas that are going to need high scrutiny are the high conservation areas, and therefore the wording, which is page, actually, I'm sure David will know, I mean, you'll know what you're looking at, you've written the plan, so you'll probably find it faster than I can. Was it page 19?
Page 19.
Yeah, no, they're not.
Okay.
They're not. That's not relating to the maps at the back. The wording
It's not related to the bits, no. So this is the dilemma, is I'm not sure what the maps are telling me. So is there another section here where those maps, if I look at the maps, I know what the orange shading is telling me to do? Is there something else that has a different range of meaning? So yeah, so if we're looking at page 95, or the ones where I was looking at 95, I can see strength and environmental protection.
So on page 98, there's 4.6.3, and that's where those maps will sit under.
98, 4.6.3. Okay, so that means look harder. Okay, but the direction is, but it's more prescriptive. Is it intended to be more prescriptive on 95? Because I would be very unhappy if you were putting a mountain bike track through a significant natural area. Extremely unacceptable. And I'd be amazed if it didn't trigger you'd have all sorts of problems with the environmental science part of council if you were starting to do that sort of carry on. Surely. I mean, they're pretty special places, significant natural areas.
Yeah, sure. I think they'd need a resource consent, and they'd have to go through a process if they wanted to build a trail through one of those areas. Like I have, yeah, SNAs can be very big. I do know that, but like I said, that the map is not showing SNAs. It's showing areas where more scrutiny is required. So we can tidy up the wording around SNAs in the document to clarify.
Yeah, I think you're going to need to tidy, because it definitely needs tidying up and a real clarity about what the intention is in the plan, because I think that will attract quite a bit of attention. If the intention is to be putting mountain bike tracks through significant natural areas, that will, you know, I'm really questioning that.
Point of order. I feel the staff member's getting pretty hammered here, and he's clarified it very clear, and I don't think anyone in the report is saying that this report is made very clear that the report's not saying that this allows building of tracks per se. The officers made it very clear that this is showing a strategy and it'll be consents to go through. So I'm just...
What's your point of order?
Just have a moment, please.
Just being a little respectful of the staff member there, because I think he's answered very well, and we're constantly hammering him on the same topic, which I think he's already answered.
I think I'm just going to take a moment because I want to check if we need to do another resolution or if we're going to actually work with this, because this seems to have gone quite a wee way. And I think that Paul has handled himself quite well with this. So we'll just take a moment and I'll check with the GAs. Yes.
Can we have a reference to what the mayor's report referring to, a page number, so we can have a look? for the wording on the SMAs.
Do we have that reference?
Got a page number, please?
Okay.
Absolutely puzzled about why that could be a point of order to try and sort out something that's quite critical to the plan.
We'll just take a moment and I will check with the GAs on that point of order and I'll find out what we're doing here with the Mayor's comments.
live, everyone. Live streaming again. Now, first I will address the procedural motion of the, I have to find a point of order. I'm on the wrong page, people. And it was, which, no, I can't see it. Oh, there it is. Hello. That page instead of that page. Was language, disrespectful, offensive, malicious. I don't support that point of order, and so we'll move on from that, and we will go back to the mayor and.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that point of order has been quite useful actually, just so we have a little break to sort out what we're going to do with the significant natural area issue. And I think in the discussion in the break between the group manager and the officers and Councillor Fulton and myself, we do think there is an inconsistency at the moment in the document in relation to how the relationship between page 90, the maps, and the table, I think that's on page 95. So there needs to be some work done just to clarify what the intent is, because if the intent of the strategy is for there to be no tracks in significant natural areas, that has quite a significant meaning. I think from the way the wording is at the moment, somebody could lend themselves to think that was going to be the outcome, but the principles and policy context is suggesting not, because currently we do have, most likely according to the officers, we most likely do have existing tracks within significant natural areas, and the thinking is not at this point to remove them out of those areas, but to be actually managing appropriately the activity within it. So they're just going to do a tidy up. But I think the intent is understood, and it'll just need a little bit of a crossover to the environment and science team and the planning team, just to make sure everything's lined up as it needs to be.
Thank you for that. And Paul's, we're fine with that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yep.
Understanding of that. That means, as again, we have a moving first on clause 3. So there's been another, and I've had that's been moved and seconded already. So I'd just like to refer back to Tim as the mover and Gail as the second. Are you comfortable with those changes to clause 3?
We haven't made the changes. We were going to look at making a change.
There's just a couple of extra words that's been put into it, so it's been slightly.
Fine with me.
Sorry, let me read off the original that we had there.
Including clarification, that's just that piece there.
Yeah, happy with that.
Thank you, and yes, thank you. Now, I would just like to say that this is actually a recommendation of an approval of a draft out and about on track strategy for community feedback. It's going out to the community for their feedback. It is a draft out and about on tracks strategy. We have had a tremendous amount of questions around this. Some, I think, have dipped in and delved into being a workshop. Some of these questions could have come through beforehand, as my co-chair put out graciously on Friday, querying and asking for questions. It's nearly a week ago, people. So there's been opportunities given, and I think I've been very generous in giving us the time this morning and questions to speak to this. And I can just say in the morning, because we're nearly after 12. So I would just say for anyone that wants to speak or ask questions of the officer from this point, be aware that if your questions have already been answered, if you're going to actually take your time to ask a question, I think that we've all been through quite a bit this morning with this topic, and I am very aware that we have a guest who has spent some time with us this morning. I thank him for his time, and I would just like to make sure that we stay on point, and I'm signalling now that there will not be much debate around this. It will be a 3 and 3. And I would just like to put that there now. So just be aware that that is where we're sitting. So we have Theo next. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Apparently
Sorry, I do have one more question, and I did send it through when I reviewed the draft agenda. And that's just in relation to the engagement with forestry owners and forestry contractors. So has that, or companies, so did that occur through the process of developing this draft?
Through the chair, through Ngāti Kowata, we have included some wording in the draft from Tasman Pine Forest Limited. And I have had feedback from the chair of the Forestry Subcommittee to include some wording which I will do which came in quite late, so I will do through the minor amendments.
All right, so has there been engagement, just with it in a sense of an intention as this goes out as well, because I can see a list of people you're directly going to let know, but I couldn't see the forestry owners in there, in the local branch, because perhaps I could just ask that you actually do that and make sure the forestry companies are aware of this as well, because the approach that we take on our forest, what we're trying to do is get consistency across mountain biking in the region to support the fantastic economic opportunity that this has. So it's good if we can really get that strong alignment actually as a regional objective rather than just on just the Nelson City Council land. Thank you, Paul. Really appreciate it if you could do that.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Rachel. Theo, please.
Got it. Thank
ask
you.
a question.
Through the chair. Looking at page 77 under point 6, which is the proposed public feedback, do you have any plans to do sort of drop-in centres aimed at youth? Because I know, especially at like Nelson College alone, there's probably 200 mountain bikers, and I can't imagine many of them will actually take the time to go on to Shape Nelson to leave their thoughts on this sort of thing. So do you have any plan to do drop-in sessions specifically aimed at youth?
Through the chair, no, they hadn't been on the plan, but that's not a bad idea. So yeah, I could discuss that with the chairs and group manager, and yeah, it's a good idea.
Thank you, Thea. I'd also like to recommend the Youth Council be involved in that. Brian.
Just looking at the pages, where am I? Strategy, looking at number 28, and it refers to national environment best practice. Have you got a document that we can refer to, or I know that you've got a reference, a couple of footnotes there, but they tend to be sort of more to do with the construction and layout of a track rather than the environmental outcomes.
Through the chair, we've got a number of design guides which definitely do address the minimisation of impact. So that's what we've tried to do here, rather than, and we're trying to focus on a track strategy as opposed to going into wider areas. So if there's another document which we can find, then we'll put it in and refer to it further up in the document, but that may be a work on. We haven't found anything so far that gives us a definitive.
So how do you know you got national environmental best practice?
Well, there's several different ways you can look at that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And the next one is any thought about giving number 32, undertake annual track inspections, about increasing the frequency? Bearing in mind some of the comments we've heard around the table about the way some of the tracks are, particularly after weather events and
Through the chairs, the question is that going to be more than annually? Or?
Yeah, I'll just talking about just annual, but whether in the terms of a strategy document, can we be a bit more flexible about?
We could be. It is new, so it's a new initiative, so it's probably an increase on what it was. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Brian. Tim.
No questions.
Trudy.
Thank you. I'll be quick.
Thanks, Trudy.
Page 74, page 75, the Trail Advisory Group, 5.16.5 and 5.17, it talks about new tracks, but does this also include the retirement of mountain bike tracks that become recreational uses, say for walkers only, or are we only identifying new tracks?
Through the chair, the intent was to be for everything, including we've referred to trade-offs to remove a lower value track and then replace it particularly around maintenance cost implications of having more and more kilometres of track. So yeah, so we've gone through and thought that would be across everything comprehensive.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Darcy?
Two quick questions. Through the chair, is the proposed trail advisory group going to be just for mountain biking or all trails?
It's all trails, and it's a broader group that looks at the needs of walkers, runners and bikers. That's the intent.
And would you like to see youth council involved on that group? Because I'm sure we'd like to be.
I think we need to have some mechanism for a youth voice. I'm not sure. That's up to other people to decide on the actual who that is.
Thank you, Darcy. Judy?
Yeah, I just had a quick clarification. Sorry, in your response to, I think it was the mayor, you mentioned you had some wording additions. Can we clarify if those wording additions are already in here? But I thought you mentioned they're part of minor amendments, and minor amendments are generally not, you know, I mean, minor amendments are a word here, a comma there, minor, whereas additions of actual text wouldn't be classified as minor amendments. So can you clarify what you were saying?
Through the chair, by minor amendments, my understanding is that it could be new text. It's just that it's not changing the intent of the document.
Can we see what the text is, or?
Sorry, I'm not actually sure exactly which bit.
It was about forestry.
Yeah, sure. There's a section on forestry in here, and I was just going to clarify that that if it's in Nelson City Council land, a trail proposed in forestry area will need to be approved by the forestry subcommittee. So that happens already. So it's really just, there's nothing changing in the procedure. It's just coded, including it in.
Oh, okay, so that was the only wording amendment?
That was the only one that I mentioned at the start of the meeting, but it wasn't relating to what the mayor was talking about, SNA.
No, it was because you said you had some wording through from the chair of forestry.
Yes, that was that.
That was that. Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. I think that we've had a great round of questions, and I would like to ask if there's going to be any debate. Gail?
Thank you. Just briefly, look, I support this going out to the public. I think it's come a long way, and we've incorporated a lot of the things that were of early concern. Particularly, I'll put the flag up for walking people, and I think that's been addressed quite well. Some of that I see came out of the COVID-19, and it doesn't surprise me that a lot of people actually chose to get out and actually walk. And so I'm pleased to see some of that in this document going out, and it'd be interesting to see what the feedback is on that. So I just want to say a big thank you for incorporating a bit more walking availability in the document. But otherwise, it's a comprehensive document that should cover most issues that have been raised in the past, and be good to see it implemented. And it'll be interesting to see what the feedback is. Thank you.
Thank you. And as the mover, Tim?
And yeah, thank you. And just in support, and just very briefly, thank you, Paul and David and the rest of the team, because I know the wealth of knowledge here and a good group that I can come to at any time, say, have you looked at this, where's that? And they're well ahead of the ball on that, because I know it's very time consuming working through this, and this has been a process which has been going in a very good direction. And as different recreational and leisure activities mature in our city, I think what we've got here covers that really well. And it will be going out, and the public will certainly come back to us if they think we've overlooked anything or think things need fine-tuning or improved. And well done, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. So I would like to put the motion forward. All those in favour of the approval of the draft out and about on track strategy for community feedback, with including the extra clause, which delegates approval of any minor amendments, including clarification provisions that relate to significant natural areas prior to release of the draft out and about on track strategy to Group Manager, Community Services and Deputy Co-Chairs, Community Recreation Committee. I'd like to put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Anyone against? Motion carried. Thank you. For item 10. We now move on to item 11 and the Community Investment Funding Panel Minutes, 28th of June, 2021. Thank you very much for your time, people. Thank you.
Mr Andrew White is the author of this report, pages 138 to 143 of your agenda. And I'd like to welcome Mr White to the table. Would you be comfortable to stay there or do you need to?
I'm happy to stay here if you're happy for me to stay here.
I think for expedience of the meeting, that's absolutely fine. Do you have anything you would like to highlight in the report on the minutes?
No, just take it as read. So the delegation for that decision making sits with the SIF panel.
Thank you. Any questions?
Oh, well, I was happy to move.
Happy to move? Okay, so you did actually raise your hand and I realise now that was for the moving. So Councillor Judine Edgar will be moving and Councillor Brian McGurk will be seconding the motion. Any debate? Any questions? Sorry, questions first.
It may not be the forum, but I'd like to find out where the forum is. I see that one of the decisions was to fund a body which doesn't base itself in Nelson, and I'm just wondering whether it fits the criteria given maybe some. Is this the right forum, or can I find out otherwise?
It's a good question, so that group has been funded previously and its application is in respect to supporting groups that are in the Nelson region. So they do work generally across both regions, but their application is in respect to groups in the Nelson region.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No. And I should imagine there was no debate? No? Okay. I will put the motion. All those in favour? All those again? Any against? Motion carried. Thank you. We're now going to move into exclusion of public from the public.
Happy to move it.
Tim is happy to move and Trudy will be seconding this. We're moving into public exclusion to, I refer to my notes. Concludes the business we have on the public agenda. We're now going to move into confidential part of the meeting. Recommendation is outlined on your agenda, page 5.
Happy to move the minutes.
Yep. Thank you very much. We'll just wait for